The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, February 6th. So I'm first show in a week. I don't know how you guys survived this week without me, and it's an open question. And of course, all hell broke out this week. It's like, what? I mean, every day there was enough news out of the Trump administration to justify an entire show easily, and nothing. And so basically, I'm going to spend today, tomorrow, Saturday, the rest of the week trying desperately to catch up and figure out, catch up on all the news that's happening, the chaos, the insanity, the craziness. In other words, just the Trump administration, has created. So we're going to be talking about that. I told you it was going to be fun. I know some of you are offended by the fact that I call this fun. But what do you? What is the point of getting depressed about it? You have no impact about it. We're going to complain about it extensively. But might as well just watch the insanity around us unfold and really enjoy the kind of the irrationality of people who are getting all tangled up in this and so on. So you can either laugh or you can cry. I prefer to laugh. You can cry if you want. Of course, it's all very serious, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the consequences of all this. They're all consequences to your life, my life, all of our lives. But it's insane. And that's, I think, the strategy. To the extent that there is a strategy, the strategy is basically to throw as much stuff out there, to do as much stuff as fast as possible. Legal, illegal, just get stuff done. And see what sticks, see what doesn't, and piss everybody off and upset everybody and be able to go back to your MAGA supporters to say, see, I gave it my best. I tried. At the very least, I created havoc and shook things up. And suddenly things are shaking up. They're shaking up. It is what it is. And it's not funny, but it's fun to watch. Not a single moment of boredom. So it's insane, unjust, and irrational, but there you have it. That is where we are in this country. All right, what are we going to cover today? A lot. We're going to cover Gaza and tariffs and DOGE and buyouts. So, employee buyouts and sovereign wealth fund. There was an executive order creating a United States sovereign wealth fund, or at least investigating, looking into, which is pretty amazing. And rare earth and USAID, USAID, and we'll finish up with something on Bitcoin, which doesn't seem to be priced. So you can evaluate it when we talk about it here later on. Let's see. Let's jump in with a discussion of, we'll start with Gaza. What the hell, right? So, when was it? Monday? I don't know. Stuff happens so fast. It's hard to tell what day it is of the week and when it's all happening. It is the craziness. And Netanyahu was visiting the White House and met with Trump. And they had a press conference. And in the press conference, Trump basically floats this idea. And based on Netanyahu's expression when he did this, I really do think this was this Trump just floating an idea, out there in the public. Basically, Trump floats the idea of the United States should take over Gaza, build resorts and everything. Maybe the Sovereign Wealth Fund can invest in the resorts in Gaza. And basically, the population of Gaza, 2 million people who live there, or just under 2 million, or whatever the number is, they will be moved to Egypt and Jordan, supposedly. And the United States will secure the area, secure Gaza, and build beautiful resorts along the beaches, and just amazing the kind of stuff you could do there, because the beaches are beautiful, beautiful beaches, and this will all be basically, American property, and the Gazans will be relocated permanently, and this will be like, I don't know, it was not clear, but almost like they were going to plant a U.S. flag in the Middle East, and this is going to be a little U.S. outpost. Maybe it could be the 52nd, 53rd, 54th, 55th. I don't know. I've lost count of the number of new states that are going to be created in the process, but with the process of Greenland and Panama and Canada. Canada's what, 6 states? 6 states or 8 states? How many states do you have in Canada? Anyway, people forget Canada's not going to be just one state. It's going to be multiple states with lots of senators and quite a few congressmen. And it wasn't clear. You could tell Netanyahu was like amusingly looking at Trump and contemplating all this and thinking, what is he talking about? There's actually a video going around just with a close-up of Netanyahu just as Trump is saying this. God, I wish I knew exactly what was going on inside his head. So he did that. Then the next day, yesterday, February 5th, so the next day, White House press secretary basically backpedals. She basically says, this is Caroline Levitt, she says, the relocation of the Gazans will be temporary, not permanent. They can all, once the United States builds them, all the buildings and all this stuff, they can all come back. Maybe the United States can build some tunnels while they're there and leave some, weapon systems while they're at it. Why not? I mean, that's what the Gazans are going to do when they get back. So it's temporary, it's not permanent, and they will come back, supposedly, again. And then she also said and made a point that President Trump is not committing to sending U.S. troops to Gaza, because what happened after the press conference with Netanyahu was MAGA flipped out. I mean, there was Candace Owen and a bunch of other, but more mainstream, I think, MAGA just flipped out. I mean, you saw a lot of people saying, "Wait a minute, didn't Trump run for office on the promise of we're getting out of the Middle East. We don't want to go into more wars in the Middle East, and we don't want the U.S. involved, and we don't want to start new wars, and we're not going to occupy new lands, and basically America first. We're going to bring everybody home." And now we're going to war with Panama. We're going to maybe war with the European Union over Greenland, and maybe with Canada to make it a state. Who knows? And now we're going to Gaza? To Gaza? Do you know what that means? She's like, "Oh, no. Don't worry, MAGA. We're going to invest in Gaza, but we're not going to actually send troops to Gaza. No troops to Gaza." So everybody's going, how's this going to work? And then she said, which again contradicts the implication, at least, of what Trump said, we're not going to pay for rebuilding of Gaza. It's not going to be us. She didn't say who would. Probably the Saudis, the Qataris, the UAW, maybe Iran. Iran paid for it last time. Iran can build the tunnels and the rest of the Arabs can build the buildings on top. Anyways, America is not going to rebuild, not going to send troops, and moving the Palestinians in temporary, not permanent. All right. So that was kind of a reset. But then Trump comes on today and he says, this is the way it's going to happen, right? This is the way he sees it. First, Israel beats Hamas. So it wins the war. No specificity in how this is done, when this is done. But first, Israel wins the war. Then the Gazans are relocated. Then America rebuilds Gaza. Not clear if American money, American supervision, American architects, American, maybe it's Saudi money with Trump development, and maybe what's his name, his son-in-law can get in on the deal as well. There are many billions of dollars to be made in developing Gaza, supposedly, particularly if the money's coming from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And no mention by Trump in his latest tweet of the Palestinians coming back. And, but he does say no American troops are needed, because why would they need to be there? Because Israel's already defeated Hamas, and the Palestinians are left. So the place is empty. What do we need troops for? There's nobody to defend against. True enough. So, I mean, this is funny. It's funny because it's ludicrous and insane. It's crazy. It's funny because, well, it's not so ludicrous and insane, actually. It's mainly funny because it's just completely unrealistic, completely detached from reality. I mean, the Israelis are loving it. So the defense secretary announced today, Israel's defense secretary announced today that the Israeli IDF is going to prepare basically a whole mechanism by which Palestinians who voluntarily want to leave the Gaza Strip will be able to go anywhere they want. And Israel will facilitate it, as if they wouldn't have facilitated in the past. Okay, so first, I mean, the Overton window. The Overton window is those ideas that are acceptable, that you can talk about, that are not going to get you called a fascist. You're not going to get you canceled. The public reasonably accepts, right? And there's a certain Overton window about Israel and the Palestinians, and deporting, right, kicking out the Palestinians out of Israel has always been outside of the Overton window. It was something that, crazy right-wing religious nuts in Israel would advocate for. Well, Trump has basically now put it inside the Overton window. And that's good. Because certainly, particularly if you make their leaving Gaza and the West Bank, why not, voluntarily, then this is a great idea. I would actually say, let's incentivize them. Let's put some money at play. Certainly, Israel would benefit if Gaza and the West Bank had fewer Palestinians. Israel could put some money into it and say, okay, so many $1,000s for every Palestinian who agrees to leave. So that's all good. That's good. But who's going to take 2 million Palestinians? 3 million if you include the West Bank. Where are they going to go? Now, it's true that, Canada and Norway and Spain and maybe some other countries around the world, Australia, have volunteered in the past to take Palestinians. But we're talking about thousands, not 2 million. Jordan indeed embraced and took in a significant number of Palestinians in 1967 after the Six-Day War. And those Palestinians fomented what looked like a civil war inside Jordan, and Jordan had to militarily, in September 1970, kick the Palestinians out, and basically kicked out the Palestinians, who then went to Lebanon and were put in refugee camps in Lebanon and started a civil war in Lebanon. Nobody's kicked them out of Lebanon, not because Lebanon wouldn't like to kick them out, but because nobody will accept them. Nobody will take them in. And Arabs love the Palestinians so much that everywhere the Palestinians actually do go, they're kept in, I was going to say concentration camps, but not really, refugee camps. They're not allowed citizenship, not allowed driver's license, not allowed employment, they're not allowed to participate in the local life. So they are forever eternal refugees. And that's how the Arab world likes it. They want to be able to dangle the Palestinian issue in front of Israel, in front of the West, to guilt them into compromises and to guilt them into selling out. I mean, the Palestinian refugees are refugees, 80 years after they left their homes. Usually refugees are resettled. Usually refugee problems are not solved by returning the refugees to where they came from, but are solved by resettling them into new countries. They can't even resettle the refugees in the ones who live in their countries, in places like Jordan, and particularly in Lebanon. They won't even settle them there. Now you expect them to absorb another 2 million? It's just... And then Egypt doesn't want them. Egypt's had lots of opportunities to take Gaza. In the 1979 peace deal with Sadat, Israel offered Egypt, please take Gaza. We don't want Gaza. And Egypt was like, nah, we don't want Gaza. You deal with the Gaza. We have no appetite for Gaza. Do they want the people of Gaza without the property of Gaza? Well, of course not. Why would they want that? It's only trouble for them. They have enough problems with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who came to power last time there were open elections in Egypt. They have enough trouble with them. They don't need the 2 million Palestinians, Hamas, who are much more sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood than other Arabs in the region. They don't need that headache. I don't know what other Arab country would take them. Tunisia, Algeria, Libya. Libya is an anarchy, so maybe you could get them into Libya. I think that would create quite a few problems for Europe and for the U.S. in terms of a hotbed for terrorism. It would turn Libya into a hotbed for terrorism. But it's just not happening. I mean, not only is it not happening, but what it's actually done is it's kind of unified the Arab world. If there's one thing the Arab world now has come together around is, oh, no, you're not evacuating Palestinians from Gaza. That is not happening. It would have been much better if you'd done this kind of stealthily, offered Palestinians money to leave, the U.S. cut quiet deals with different places around the world, shipped them out by the thousands slowly over time, and maybe made some dent in the population. But 2 million? I mean, the Saudis have come out and said, this is ridiculous, this is not happening. Forget about normalization with Israel as long as that is on the plate. And indeed, now the Saudis are saying, we will not normalize with Israel. We will not have a peace deal with Israel unless the Palestinians have their own state with East Jerusalem as their capital. Which, by the way, they were offered in 1999, and Yasser Arafat declined. It's one of these where Trump can say outrageous stuff, everybody's going to, assume he's a big friend of Israel, I guess. People are getting excited. Everybody's going to get, start planning. There's probably people planning to build, try buy real estate in Gaza and build. But the probability of it happening is very close to zero. And yet it'll get a lot of press. It'll get a lot of attention. Trump, for his MAGA crowd, I mean, some of them and the pro-Israel crowd is going to look like a hero, and actually nothing's happened. I mean, it's in terms of actual impact on the world is zero. The one thing it's done is it's significantly strengthened the hand of the far right in Israel, which is not healthy for Israel. But it's strengthened the hand of the far right in Israel. And even if you believe in that this is the ultimate solution, get the Palestinians out of Gaza, this is probably not the way to go around about it. I'm curious to see how this develops because, I don't know if it can go anywhere, literally anywhere. So we'll see. And again, the Israeli far right will pick this up and use this to justify their own position. I'm not sure what Netanyahu does with this. And I'm not sure what the Palestinians do with this. And I'm not sure how this affects the actual question of what is going on, what is going to happen now in Gaza once this round of hostage release is over. What is phase 2? What is phase 3? Is Israel going to be given the green light to go in and engage in war again? What exactly is the solution? Because this is not a solution, at least not unless somebody forces Egypt to do it. Now, the United States could force Egypt. That is true. The United States provides Egypt with $3 billion of foreign aid. We'll talk about foreign aid later, but with foreign aid every single year. $3 billion of foreign aid every year. The United States sells massive quantities of weapons to Egypt. Egypt's a poor country. It would really struggle without the $3 billion in foreign aid. By the way, the reason Egypt gets the $3 billion of foreign aid is it was part of the peace deal signed in Camp David when Jimmy Carter was president, that Egypt continues to get this $3 billion basically forever in exchange for not going to war with Israel. And when Trump suspended all foreign aid, I can't even remember when that was, a week ago? A week and a half ago? He made, the exception was Egypt, this $3 billion, and the United States, and Israel. Israel doesn't get $3 billion, it gets all kinds of military aid and stuff. It doesn't get a straight kind of funding. And so, the United States could say, Egypt, you want your $3 billion, you want your weapon systems, you want us to keep maintaining the weapon systems, you want us to keep all of that, take in the 2 million Gazans, and put them somewhere where they're not on the border with Israel, because you don't want to create another Gaza just somewhere else on the border with Israel. Put them, in the Sahara Desert somewhere. That would be good. I find it hard to believe Egypt would ever do that, but U.S. does have leverage over Egypt. It has leverage over Jordan. Jordan is another recipient of U.S. foreign aid. It also, its entire military is basically U.S. weapon systems, so they are dependent on the United States. The United States could force Jordan and Egypt to do this. Now, the counterbalance that is Saudi Arabia. If Saudi Arabia says, no, this is unacceptable, and basically tells the United States, Saudi Arabia can threaten the United States in a variety of different ways. One of Trump's big priorities, we'll get to this a little later, is lowering the price of oil. Well, the Saudis can really hamper that if they want to. They can side with China. They can side with Russia. They can be more friendly to Iranians. They can replace the United States with $3 billion to Egypt. Maybe even China would be willing to replace the $3 billion of aid to Egypt instead of the United States. You never know. And suddenly that completely changes the geopolitics of the entire Middle East if China or the Saudis are playing such a big role. So, anyway, that is the status of Trump's proposal. I think the status of it is it can't go anywhere, and it won't go anywhere. It's just one of these crazy things Trump says, Trump does. Everybody freaks out. And I don't know, in a month we'll forget. Maybe not, because Gaza will still be a problem, a thorn in the side of Israel. So in 4 years, we'll just have to see where we are. And maybe the J.D. Vance administration will find a solution for Gaza once Trump is out. Although, arguably, you know, in terms of what actually is happening on the ground, maybe this is a J.D. Vance administration. If J.D. Vance is closer to Musk than Trump is, maybe it's already a J.D. Vance administration. Anyway, let's not engage in conspiracy theories. I don't want to start conspiracy theories. That's not good. Let me just see quickly. Not that. All right. I'm going to take Colleen's question because it relates directly to Gaza quickly, and it's $50. Thank you, Colleen. Really, really appreciate it. Colleen says, could Israel just let the Gaza Strip be its own country? Stop supporting it, treat it like a real independent country. Would the world then be okay with retaliation for acts of war? No, the world would not be okay. The reality is that Gaza was its own country until October 7th. It basically had borders. It controlled its borders. It had, Israel just, for certain goods and certain products, embargoed this independent country. But Israel did supply this country with electricity because Gaza couldn't supply it themselves. It supplied them with water because Gaza couldn't supply it themselves. And it supplied them with things like internet service and phone service, which it still does to this day, all of those things. But it was its own country. It had its own police force, its own government, its own health ministry. Of course, if a Gazan got cancer and it couldn't be treated locally, they would come into Israel and get treatment in Israel, and the Israeli state would pay for that, and they would get cancer treatment. But for all intents and purposes, Gaza was its own country. And one of the reasons Israel left Gaza in 2005 was the idea, as long as we rule it, we're responsible for policing it, and that's a messy business, and we can't really crush them. We can't go in there and really destroy them, because it's part of Israel. We can't use rule engagement of war because they're not a separate political entity. So they said, if we leave and then they attack us, then we can just go in and annihilate them. Well, they did that. They left. Hamas, Gaza, really, attacked Israel. And Israel has never annihilated them. I mean, it came the closest this time, but it's still completely restrained, didn't do what's necessary, left them alone. So no, that's already been tried. And it was really the rationale behind leaving Gaza in the first place. Create this political entity that is Gaza, ruled by Hamas, or whoever rules it. And if they attack us, we'll crush them, like we would crush an enemy country. But they attack, and they attack, and they attack, and they attack, and Israel did nothing. And then they attacked in a major way October 7th, and Israel did something, but not enough to win, not enough to crush them, not enough to change the dynamic. All right. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out with Trump. I mean, I don't know. I think ultimately, my view is, and you guys will see how it plays out. My view is Trump cares more about Saudi Arabia than he does about Israel at the end of the day. And I think Saudis ultimately will dictate U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians. The Saudis wanted some kind of two-state solution. I think in the end of the day, Trump is going to really squeeze Netanyahu around a two-state solution. This is what he did his first term There was a peace plan. It was only introduced, I think, the year of the election, and there was COVID, and there were a lot of distractions. But I think this time it could be introduced a lot earlier. It could be roped in with the Saudi deal, joining the Abraham Accords, and a demand that Israel compromise. Because I think at the end of the day, it's in many respects easier to force Israel to compromise than it is to force the Arabs to compromise. And, I think Trump doesn't care about the outcome. He cares about a deal. And if the deal means squeezing Israel, then he'll squeeze Israel. He has no qualms, none whatsoever, I think, about squeezing Israel at all. So that's where I expect things to go. But this is going to play out over months. It's going to play over a long time. In the meantime, a lot of people are playing with this idea, let's resettle Gaza and let's get rid of the Gazans, put them somewhere else, and and there are a lot of people with all kinds of dreams for what the beachfront of Gaza looks like. But the reality is, I just want to put a little bit of reality into this idea of there's a beautiful beachfront, we can build resorts there. Sure. But that beachfront also exists in Egypt and the northern Sinai. It's the same beach. That beachfront also exists just north of Gaza in Israel, all the way up to Haifa, right? That's all beach, basically. And those resorts exist in Tel Aviv and other places around the coast. It's not clear that Quad Gaza, is uniquely situated, better situated than Egypt or Israel to take advantage of the beautiful Mediterranean beaches. There's nothing that special about Gaza. It's got some nice beaches, nice beachfront, but so does the rest of the Mediterranean. So it seems to me like all of this is really just pie in the sky fantasy. I think if developers actually looked at building resorts and so on in Gaza, what are the economics of it? It's just not clear to me that the economics are positive. Maybe they are. Maybe Tel Aviv's already overwhelmed, and we need that area of the Middle East needs more resorts. But again, it's part of this detached from reality, detached from facts, detached from actually being on the ground and knowing what's there. Complete detached, throw ideas out there into the world, see what sticks or not, and go to the next crisis. No, it's not like the French Riviera, but again, there are beautiful beaches from Turkey down to Egypt. There's no lack of beautiful beaches. So it's not like there's a scarcity of beautiful beach stretches on which to build resorts. We need Gaza. We need resorts in Gaza because that they have the solution. He doesn't want to build housing for the Palestinians. He wants to build resorts, beautiful resorts on the beaches there. That's what he wants to build. And the Palestinians are out. The Palestinians, he wants to build housing for the Palestinians, but in Egypt and in Jordan. At least that was the initial proposal. I'm not sure now if they're going to come back, if he's going to build them housing in Gaza when they come back. But if they come back, then what stops them from building the tunnels and getting the weapons and starting all over again, and it all starts over? What's the point? Building them condos, and they won't build tunnels under the condos, so they have nice condos versus horrible condos? Again, they've had the billions and billions of dollars. This is like economic determinism. If you just give a Palestinian a nice home, they'll stop being a terrorist. If you give a Hamas fighter a nice home, he'll renounce his Islamist ideology. If you just built a few nice theaters and cinemas and malls, they'll all become 100% civilized, and they'll chuck their barbarism, and they'll never do another October 7th. Again, delusions. All right, let's talk about delusions. So that was Gaza, right? And we've got like 7 topics like this still to go. the weekend, there was a lot of fun because, as you know, over the weekend, Trump signed executive orders basically declaring a fentanyl emergency. A fentanyl emergency. A state of emergency so that he could use the powers granted to him, I guess, by Congress, that if he declares an emergency, he can use tariffs unilaterally without the consent of Congress, without Congress having to pass any law or anything. It's just unilaterally. And so Trump signed these executive orders declaring a fentanyl and a U.S. illegal border crossing emergency. Emergency. Now, this in complete, evasion of the fact that illegal border crossing have been dropping, for months now, really since the Biden administration started to take the whole issue of border crossing seriously as a political liability and just stop them. It's not that hard to do, and they did. So border crossings have stopped significantly. Fentanyl use in the United States have also subsided, so have smuggling into the United States. So there are fewer, last year there were fewer fentanyl deaths. Then this is now a new, what seems like a new pattern where fentanyl deaths peaked at some point a few years ago and have already started to decline. But no, now, today, this last weekend, we were in an emergency and we need to do something immediately. Of course, illegal immigration and fentanyl smuggling in from Canada have never been a problem. Were never an issue. It's trivial at best. I'm sure some fentanyl gets in. Remember fentanyl, little white pills, mostly smuggled in by Americans. Yeah, I'm sure some did it over the Canadian border. Emergency, though. And I'm sure some illegal immigrants come in from Canada. Emergency, though? I mean, it's all BS, right? The emergency declaration is just a way for Trump to get emergency powers. It's all about power. Anyway, these emergency declarations allow Trump to say that he was going to impose 25% tariffs on all imports from Canada, except for one, oil. We'll get back to that, which is only going to be 10%. Mexico 25%, and China 10%. Now, as you know the story, he got on the phone on Monday with the president of Mexico and cut a deal where he's going to delay the tariffs for 30 days, and she is going to stop, or she is going to invest significantly in slowing down the exportation of fentanyl into the United States and slowing down the amount of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. Again, both have already slowed down, so she'll just take credit for what's already happening. And then he got the same deal with Trudeau. I'm sure Trudeau is still scratching his head about how I'm going to slow down something that barely exists anyway. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. But anyway, so he's delayed the tariffs on those two countries for 30 days. And with China, we have 10% tariffs. Again, we'll get to that in a minute. A few interesting things happen at the same time. For years, Trump has been telling us that foreign countries pay the tariffs. That all tariffs, they don't hurt America. America benefits enormously. From tariffs, and the foreign countries pay the tariffs. Fentanyl comes in from Mexico. It's also produced locally in the United States, but it's been in decline, is the point. But it doesn't come in from Canada. Almost nothing comes in from Canada. Find a source that shows that fentanyl comes in significant quantities from Canada. I haven't seen any of it. By the way, fentanyl, again, is small white pills. You can probably carry it in your pockets into the United States on any flight you fly on. if you think Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, is going to go to war with her cartels in order to appease Donald Trump, you got something else coming. You're probably expecting the Gazans to be invited into Egypt and settled in Egypt somewhere. Anyway, Trump acknowledged for the first time, really, some really, really important ideas this weekend about tariffs. Things that me and many other people have been saying for a very long time. Trump admitted, finally. First, he said, over the weekend, in an unbelievable admission, he said, there's going to be some pain from the new tariffs. There's going to be some pain. Why is there going to be pain? I thought this was truly painless. I thought Canadians paid for the tariffs, and we would only get the benefit of more revenue and cheaper, same prices wouldn't change. I'm not sure how that works. But anyway, tariffs are a beautiful thing, he said. Tariffs are amazing. Now, he did say it's all going to be worth it in the end. But in the short run, he admitted to some pain. Wow, that's amazing. But then, even more important than that, Trump, in his actions, basically admitted that Americans pay the full cost of the tariffs, or at least the majority of the tariffs. How do we know that? How do we know? In what way? Here's a quiz for all of you who know a little bit of economics. What is it about Trump's actions vis-a-vis Canada, which tells us that he knows, or at least the people around him know enough to push his buttons to get him to do this kind of stuff, that Americans will pay the cost? What? Well, yeah, Ian's got it exactly right. He didn't put 25% tariffs on oil. He only put 10. Because he knows that if he puts 25% tariffs on oil prices will skyrocket in the United States. The reality is that many of America's refineries, this is why the KL, whatever it's called, pipeline was so important. The United States refineries need heavy oil in order to refine. The kind of oil that comes out of Texas, out of the Permian Basin, is not the kind of oil that many of America's refineries were built to process. Keystone XL, thank you. They can refine Russian oil. Russia has heavy oil, but we don't import from Russia. But Canada has heavy oil. So the idea is you get heavy oil into American refineries, and they basically refine for the gasoline that we all use in our cars. Certainly, much of central part of America, the Midwest, gets oil from refineries that use Canadian oil. Oil prices would have gone up just at a time when Donald Trump is telling us he is going to make energy cheaper. He is going to reduce oil prices. And he knew that 25% tariffs would increase oil prices. That's why he didn't do it. So whether Trump knows this, who knows what Trump knows he knows, who knows what he knows, or whether people around him whispered it to him or kind of twisted his arm or whatever, I don't know. But the reality is that Trump this weekend admitted that tariffs, Americans pay a heavy price for tariffs. The prices in America will go up if tariffs are imposed. He admitted this by saying there would be some pain. He admitted this by only putting a 10% tariff on Canadian oil. I don't think this makes any difference long term. And everybody said, oh, this is a negotiating tactic to get what he wants. But what does he want? What does he want? Is he really concerned about fentanyl and illegal immigration? I don't think so. Illegal immigration, he's going to build a wall and he's going to deport people. He doesn't need Mexico's help. He needs Mexico's help to the extent that they're already helping. Fentanyl? Do you think Trump cares about fentanyl? He doesn't. But what he got from the Mexicans is nothing. And certainly Canada has nothing to do with the fentanyl crisis. So he paused for 30 days, but what he really wants is a trade surplus because he truly believes, he really, really believes. Now, people around him, some of the people around him don't believe this, but he believes that trade deficits are a subsidy. He wants Canada and Mexico to subsidize us. So he wants a trade surplus. I don't know how you negotiate a deal where America gets a trade surplus. Tariffs are going to keep coming back because this did nothing. It just postponed it and delayed it. It doesn't satisfy what he actually wants. Fentanyl, illegal immigration has nothing to do with this. And, you know, he might exclude oil from Canada because, but if you exclude oil with Canada, if you exclude oil, we actually have a surplus with Canada in trade. We export more than we import, not including the oil. But America needs, you know, 25% tariff would probably raise U.S. gas prices by 70 cents a gallon, certainly in the Midwest. That's a big price. Anyway, oil prices are going to play a big factor both in the Gaza thing and tariffs with China. Okay, a few other things about tariffs. There's a lot to talk about here. Now, you know, the China tariffs are still there, 10%. China's already retaliated. So they've done it strategically on particular industries so as to harm themselves the least and to try to harm American industries the most. For example, one of the clever things China's done is China has opened an antitrust investigation into Google and into NVIDIA. And they're threatening an antitrust investigation into Apple. In other words, they're just copying the Trump administration policy around antitrust. They're mimicking all the lawsuits we have against them, which Trump is committed to, and they're going to do the same thing. But they're going to harass American companies. They know that the way to get to Trump is to get the CEO of Apple to lobby Trump, the CEO of Google to lobby Trump, the CEO of NVIDIA to lobby Trump. And that's the way to get these tariffs. And then there's the question of how's Apple going to pay for the 10% tariff? Remember, most iPhones are assembled in China. The actual added value of the assembly is very little. How are you going to calculate the tariffs? How does the tariff work on that, the 10% tariffs, when they import them back into the United States? Is it just over the added value from China, or is it the whole value of the iPhone? Does this mean all iPhones and other Apple products built in China or assembled in China are going to be more expensive? A lot of complexity to the 10% tariffs in China. China's taking it in stride. They figure Trump wants to negotiate. Generally, why only 10% on China? Almost all the fentanyl in the end comes from China. It produces all the chemicals to make the fentanyl, and it ships them to Mexico, where it's assembled and created and shipped over to the United States. Why not higher tariffs in China? There's something going on with China, right? With Trump and China. We'll see how it all plays out. Anyway, one other interesting thing about tariffs, well, a few interesting things. By the way, there's an excellent article about the tariffs in the Dispatch by Scott Lincicome. You know, I'm a big fan of Scott Lincicome's work. Encourage you to read it. Scott Lincicome on the Dispatch about the tariff, these tariffs. Another few things about the tariff. U.S. prices are going to rise very fast when tariffs are announced. Indeed, in anticipation of the tariffs before the weekend, some prices already started to go up. Over the weekend, people were already quoting higher prices in anticipation of the tariffs. This is true both of imports and of exports, because the anticipation was that Canada would retaliate, so would Mexico. Canada indeed did offer a whole package of retaliation in terms of tariffs. Prices of most tariff goods are going to rise, and energy and steel in particular, the rise will be instantaneous. As soon as the tariffs are announced, or even in anticipation, as soon as the rumor starts that the tariffs are going to go up. And again, this shows over and over again that tariffs are taxing Americans. Here's a good example. The price of propane in, I think this is Massachusetts, in New England anyway. Everybody on February 2nd, consumers of, I guess, Irving Oil, which is a Canadian-based company that exports propane from Canada into New England. They sent a letter to all their customers basically saying that they could expect to see a 10% increase in propane prices in the next week. That is immediately. Gasoline prices shot up 7 cents in advance of the tariffs in anticipation of. So there's no question. Even steel prices, and here it's clever, right? Steel, because the U.S. imports steel from Canada. It's not just that steel prices went up from Canada. American steel companies who produce steels in the U.S. started raising prices before the tariffs even went into effect, just in anticipation of the tariffs. Which just shows you that even if you stop buying Canadian goods because we don't want Canada, buy America, prices are going to go up. American companies are going to say, oh, we don't have competition for Canada anymore. Let's raise prices. Truly, everything economics expect will happen, happens, and people still deny it. I saw online all week long people burying their head in the sand. Buy America, as if that is cheaper. Buy America is the most anti-American thing you can do. Buy America is the most anti-American thing you can do. There's a great essay by Harry Binswanger. You can find that, I think, online for free. Buy American is un-American. And he's absolutely right. Foreign governments will retaliate. Again, Canada did. Mexico is about to. China's already has. So we will see the full manifestation of all that. And then BS to fentanyl. This is what Donald Trump wrote right after he had signed the emergency, the emergency fentanyl emergency, and imposed the tariff or threatened to impose the tariffs and did all that. This is what he wrote on Truth Social. The tariff lobby, headed by the globalists and always wrong Wall Street Journal, is working hard to justify countries like Canada, Mexico, China, and too many others to name continue the decades-long ripoff of America, both with regard to trade, crime, and poisonous drugs that are allowed to so freely flow into America. That was one sentence. Those days are over. The United States has major deficits with Canada, Mexico, and China, and almost all countries owes $36 trillion, and we're not going to be the stupid country any longer. Make your product in the USA, and there are no tariffs. Why should the United States lose trillions of dollars in subsidizing other countries? And why should these other countries pay a small fraction of the cost of what USA citizens pay for drugs and pharmaceuticals, as an example? This will be the golden age of America. Will there be some pain? Yes, maybe, and maybe not. But we will make America great again, and it will be all worth the price that must be paid. We are a country that is now being run with common sense, and the result will be spectacular. He always goes back to mercantilism. He is a mercantilist through and through. He's an anti-capitalist, anti-trade, perceptual level economic ignoramus. That was a nice word. The first words that came were being fed from my subconscious were much, much worse than ignoramus. He says in another post, we pay hundreds of billions of dollars to subsidize Canada. Why? There is no reason. We don't, also on the 2nd of February, we don't need anything they have. We have unlimited energy, should make our own cars, and have more lumber than we can ever use. Without this massive subsidy, Canada ceases to exist as a viable country. Harsh but true, therefore Canada should become our cherished 51st state, much lower taxes and far better military protection for the people of Canada and no tariffs. Remember, Canada is an ally of the United States. It's fought side by side with the United States. It's in every respect an ally, a friend. This is how you treat friends. This is how you treat allies. This guy is a milk in the list through and through. This is not about fentanyl. It's not about illegal immigration. It's not about negotiations. And finally, as long as this emergency power that the president can use holds in the courts, why should any country in the world trust anything the United States agrees to? Like we had for many, many years a NAFTA agreement. NAFTA was renegotiated by Donald Trump and signed by Donald Trump and approved by Congress under Donald Trump in his first administration. It was replaced with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, which he said at the time was the best and most important trade deal ever made by the United States. That's a direct quote. And then he comes into office, and with a signature, it's gone. The trade deal is just gone. It doesn't require Congress, doesn't require any action by anybody. It's just a signature, and it's gone. Why should anybody, anywhere in the world, ever trust any trade deal that America signs? Now, this has to be stopped. This IEEPA, which is the emergency powers that the president has to impose tariffs, this is the responsibility of Congress, always has been the responsibility of Congress. So Congress has to take it back. Now, Congress won't act. Congress is incompetent and dumb and happy to not have the responsibility. So the courts are going to have to rule this in one way or another unconstitutional. Have to give this power back to Congress, force Congress to take it. Because the fact is, again, with 2 signatures on Saturday, what did he call it? The best and most important trade deal ever made by the United States went up in smoke. It became meaningless. You know, forever the world has talked about the United States being a bully, which is not being true. Now it is a bully. Trump is a bully. And he's turning the United States into a bully state, which other countries will not want to get involved with. They can trade without us. It will take them a while, but they can. And the reality is that if people start walking away from trading with the United States, if people start walking away from trade deals with the United States, it's you and me and American businesses and farmers and companies and consumers and everybody will suffer. Will suffer. It's really, people don't understand how bad this is. And one more dimension of this. And my other topics are not going to each take half an hour like the first 2. Although they're all big topics. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. And there's a lot more that can be said about tariffs and the economics of it, and China, what China did and all of that. We'll get to it in the days to come. But here's the other thing. And this relates not just to tariffs, but relates to the entire administration and everything that Trump is doing and the way he's doing it, which I think he's relishing, and I think Musk is relishing. But there is a consequence. The one thing business doesn't like, doesn't want, doesn't embrace is uncertainty and chaos. One of the reasons inflation is deemed such a harmful phenomena is not just that your prices go up and you feel the prices go up, but from an economic perspective, the real danger of inflation is that it makes economic calculation by businesses almost impossible. Economic coordination is done, and therefore the basis for planning is done through prices. And the more volatile, the more unlinked prices are to underlying phenomena, the more they are a monetary phenomena, the more it's hard for businesses to say, is a price is going up because of increased demand, a price is going up because there's just more money. What's causing prices to go up? It's uncertainty that inflation creates that is the real economic damage. This is true of these constant, ongoing, never-ending threats of tariffs. Trump also threatened the European Union with tariffs. But it's also true with what DOGE is doing and with what just generally the kind of thrust of the Trump presidency. He's creating chaos, uncertainty. Nobody knows what's a meme and what's actually going to be done. Nobody knows what's a threat, negotiating tactic, and what's real. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. There's no transparent plan in terms of here are the deregulation steps we're going to take. Here are the things we're going to do. There is chaos. And chaos reduces economic activity. It reduces capital expenditures, reduces the ability to plan, and it is a major, major, major force to retard growth. Like manufacturers, one executive said, of a manufacturing company, said, we have had to suspend every capital expenditure project we have for the next 24 months until we better understand the trade situation. It's not good for the American economy. And that's just one company. It's truly nuts. I mean, you can revolutionize government. You can blow it all up in a sense. But tell us exactly what you're going to do and do it. And of course, going through the legislative process is also an advantage because then you know it sticks. Everything done by executive orders can be reversed like that. Maybe not by Trump, but maybe by the next president quite easily. Do you know, I'll just give you one example. Do you know that the way the auto parts business works, you know, some plants in Canada, some plants in the US, and they're often very close to one another just across the border, right, in places like Michigan. And sometimes, basically, a product will pass the border, across the border, 7 times before it's finalized. 7 times. Goes from Canada to the US, put into, let's say, something, and then goes back to Canada where something is done to it, back to the United States, something else is done to it, back to Canada. And when tariffs are 0, that is seamless. But when you put 25% tariffs on that, how do you even calculate that? How do you even calculate that? Every time it passes 25, what is going, it's insanity. Imagine the planning that now has to change. And you think that moving the plants to the United States, that's the solution, but where are the employees for those plants? Who are they? Where are they? Where's the capital expenditure? What about the waste? The plants already exist in Canada. Why would you replicate them in the US? It's insanity. It's the dumbest economic policy, short of out-and-out socialism, that one can imagine. Just sheer economic stupidity and ignorance. And it's an idea the mercantilist idea that was basically debunked by Adam Smith in 1776. The year The Wealth of Nations was published. No, let's Let's keep making the same error. Let's ignore Adam Smith and every economist since pretty much, and let's believe some crazy half-baked ideas by some conservative nationalists who think this will bring prosperity to the United States. Mercantilism will, when it's just a failure. It always has been. Talk about chaos. DOGE is going full out into government, trying to change everything, cut $1 to $2 trillion of government spending. That's the goal, right? So it's questioning government contracts. It's getting a hold of the government's big databases, payment systems, although a judge just stopped them from doing that, so they have no access anymore. Judges are going to be crucial here because everything is going to be litigated. They're going in there and finding stuff, right? Finding stuff, supposedly, fraud, overpayment, and stuff, right? And, there's no question. There's a lot of waste and probably quite a bit of fraud in the government systems. I have no doubt that is the case. And, my guess is the people, the DOGE is putting in front of these computer screens and databases are far more qualified than the government employees in terms of analyzing data and stuff like that. And they'll probably find stuff. And they'll cut $1 billion here, $1 billion there. And they might even manage to cut the federal workforce, I don't know, by $3 billion, let's say. And on we might go. Although we'll get to why none of that is really real in a minute. But remember that the federal government spends 7,000 billions. That's 7 trillion, but $7,000 billion. $7,000 billion. Now, there's nothing coming out of Congress, which is supposed to pass a big budget, the big mother of all bills, pass a big budget that involves cutting $1 billion, cutting 1,000 billion, which is $1 trillion. Nothing. Quite the contrary. From the accounting perspective, the tax cuts that Trump and Congress are proposing are going to add close to $1 trillion in terms of deficit spending. So if you add up the increase in spending that Trump and Congress wants and the tax cuts, that's almost $1 trillion of more deficit. Even if you eliminate 20% of all federal workers, you save $60 billion. $60 billion is good. It's good. It's less than 1% of the federal budget. And it's nowhere close to $1 trillion. Imagine you overhaul the federal systems. You made the payment system super efficient. You got rid of all the little fraud and errors and all of that. Save another $80 billion. $140 billion. Okay, I'm all for saving $140 billion from the federal budget every day. That's dwarfed by the spending increases that Republicans are going to approve in Congress in the next few weeks. Now, you could just stop payments. Like you could impound whole sections. No more foreign aid. But the reality is that that's, almost certainly unconstitutional and certainly not going to survive, put aside the courts, not going to survive their own analysis of your own administration. Trump will want to use foreign aid. It's leverage on countries. But as long as you've taken out, as long as Trump is serious about not touching Social Security, Medicare, defense, veterans, border, and interest payment on debt, that's 2/3 of all spending. You can't, the third left is not going to be enough. And it's not like this GOP Congress is eager to cut spending, actually cut spending. They're not. They haven't proposed, and they're not going to propose a budget that actually cuts spending. So, I mean, you could do it, but you would have to start with Medicare and Social Security reform. You'd have to go to the big items. And yeah, you could also cut all the fraud and waste and all that stuff and cut the number of employees and all that. Fine. But doing that without touching Medicare and Social Security, you're not going to achieve your goals. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere. And it's not clear that even those things are actually going to happen. So take, for example, the attempt to get, to reduce the workforce by 10% by offering federal employees buyouts. The deadline was supposed to be the end of the day today. All you had to do was reply to an email saying, I resign, and you get into this program where you don't have to work until the end of the fiscal year, but you continue to get paid, and then you can go find another job, right? So you get laid off, but you get, 8 months or something of salary in spite of not having to work, or maybe working part-time or working from home, or there's some confusion about what it actually means. So far, maybe 40, maybe 60,000 staff have agreed. Maybe by the end of the day today, that number will be significantly higher. But in the meantime, for example, a federal judge has blocked the offer and blocked the deadline. So the deadline is not today, and it's indefinitely, and he is going to hold hearings on Monday. So again, it's not clear that you can do this. This payout without working, you'd think requires Congress to pass a law. So I think one way or another, it's likely that this team is going to try to restructure all federal agencies, all federal departments, and reduce their, the employee count. I'm not sure if this is the way they're going to be able to achieve it. Supposedly the goal was to use this to cut 5 to 10% of federal workforce. We'll see if they get anywhere close to that number. So far, it's only 2%. But maybe they will. There's still hours and maybe days or weeks, because the federal judge has extended this indefinitely for now. And Musk is going around encouraging people to resign and declaring that there will be restructurings all over the place. And look, the executive branch has the responsibility to execute, has the responsibility to hire and fire people in order to execute the money Congress allocates. But to really save money, they need to stop having Congress allocate. They need to start shrinking spending, not just on salaries, but on the actual activities. Right? So, the buyout is on hold for now. We'll see what happens. But generally, everything that Musk is doing is questionable legally. So, for example, he took control over the databases, the payment systems at the Treasury Department. Well, there's been a lawsuit. The administration now says, no, Musk was not going to have access to the payment system because there are privacy concerns. And again, only because of the lawsuit. So there doesn't seem to be the plan seems to be to create chaos. The plan seems to be to go in and break stuff. It doesn't seem to be, again, and I talked about this months ago, right? A strategy. What is the strategy to shrink government spending? What programs can be shut down? What bills need to be passed in Congress in order to shut down these agencies? What bills need to be passed in Congress in order to reduce spending on these things? What bills need to be passed in Congress to truly shrink government? And then how do we execute on that? No, let's just go in and smash stuff. And then get our hands on databases and make stuff up. Just make stuff up. What the hell? Let's make stuff up. So, this brings us to USAID, so this is a little out of order. That's fine. So one of the things that Musk has got his hands on is USAID, which is an international organization that provides charity to the world, inside the United States, outside the United States, grants. Ridiculous. USAID should be shut down and gone. And what is it, $60 billion organization? See, here's a number of issues here, right? One, I would be for shutting it down and stopping all that aid, zeroing out. I'm against the welfare state. I'm certainly against the welfare state on an international basis. So take it to Congress and shut it down. But what are they doing? They're not shutting anything down. They're shutting down something called U.S. Agency for International Development. But all of its functions, all the grant making, all the dollar spend is not being shut down. It's moving to the State Department. What's his name? Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, has basically appointed responsible for USAID, its disbursements. Those disbursements have all been approved by Congress, have not been reversed. Trump can't reverse them unilaterally, and it's not clear he wants to. Ultimately, these people are all for welfare. Now, so Musk and his guys would like to shrink USAID, and they'd like to make it clear to all of you that this is an evil organization and a bad organization. To do that, they are spreading lies, boatfuls of lies. They're making stuff up. Now, let's be clear. I believe USAID should be shut down. 100%. All those grants should be zeroed out. Every single one of them, and everybody there should be fired. But to do that, you just have to go through Congress. Now, if it turns out that the president can impound, that the courts actually give the executive the power to decide not to fund something that Congress wants, I doubt the courts would agree with that. Maybe they will. I don't know. But if they do, okay, then shut it down. But they're not shutting it down. Don't let them cause you to think, don't you believe that they're going to shut any of this down. Maybe they'll take the agency from $60 billion to $58 billion or $54 billion. But they're not zeroing it out, which is the only thing appropriate to do with it. Now, in what way are they lying? Well, they want you to hate USAID. So, for example, stories came out that USAID was spending $1 gazillion on Politico, the online publication. And it seemed like a huge amount of money to be spending on Politico, and it looked like, and they suggested that what this was USAID, the U.S. government, basically paying a media company, maybe for good print. Maybe this is a Biden administration thing where they paid them to support them. But that turns out to be complete BS. Politico sells a service. I think it's $10,000 a person, a piece. Politico sells a service, $10,000, that tracks legislation, that provides all kind of information to bureaucrats and lawmakers. Marjorie Taylor Greene's office subscribes to this service by Politico and pays them $10,000. So do many Republican House members. So yes, a lot of people within government had purchased subscriptions for the Politico service paid for by the U.S. government. Not just USAID, all of the U.S. government. And that was the $8 million, was all of the purchases of subscriptions for Politico by different departments in the government. Now, you could argue they shouldn't do that. Maybe. But that's not buying Politico so they do favorable stories. There's also a line item where a lot of money has been spent on the New York Times. A lot of money has been spent on the New York Times. Again, the government is paying the New York Times for positive coverage. Is that what it is? Now, first, the guy who did the New York Times search in the database got results that weren't just the New York Times, but lots of other stuff that had New York in it, Times in it. He didn't do a proper search. This is what happens when you have ignoramuses using a database. I mean, they might be super coders, but that doesn't mean they know how to search a particular data set. So the first pass, the amount of money spent on the New York Times seemed this outrageous figure. And then when people looked into it, no, it included all kinds of other items that had nothing to do with the New York Times. Then, when they actually look at the amount of money spent on the New York Times, it's not that big of an amount. And again, it's basically various departments within the government, in order to stay informed, buying subscriptions to New York Times. And you might find that, not right, but it's not massive fraud, and it's not the government writing a big fat check to the New York Times in order to get positive publicity. And by the way, this buying of the New York Times and the data set, which he said was over 4 years, the Biden administration, actually turned out to be over 8 years. It included the first Trump administration. And it's been going on forever. Government employees use their government account to buy subscriptions to the New York Times, and they get paid. So the USAID stuff, while I am all for getting rid of it, there is something called the rule of law in the United States. And while I'm all for pushing the boundaries of that in order to shrink government, I really am. If I were president, we'd be really pushing the boundaries. You can't just throw out the rule of law. And it's a problem. Because the reality is that Congress is responsible for this. And this is the sense in which you're not going to be able to make fundamental changes to the American system of government unless you have the people's backing. And you don't have the people's backing. The majority of the Republicans are too small, both in the House and in the Senate, to really, really make radical changes, even if they wanted to, and the Republicans don't. And the American people don't want it. One of the things about lying, just as an aside, and Trump knows this, and he's mastered this. He's learned it from the left, because the left knows this. But Trump has become a master of it, is if you lie, and you repeat the lie over and over and over again in a casual kind of way, as if it's obviously the truth, then everybody believes the lie, no matter how much fact-checking, counter-evidence there is, no matter how, if authorities in places of authority, people in place of authority repeat the lie over and over again, people start believing it and will believe it. I've seen it on so many issues. Again, primarily by the left, but the right is catching up. Now, here's the real issue, and then we'll go into some of these other issues. Here's the real issue behind what DOGE and Trump and all this is happening. Where the rubber will hit the road and where we should be really, really, really wary. Imagine on one of these issues, it goes to the courts, and the courts rule what Trump is doing is unconstitutional. Tariffs, maybe. Or because Congress is responsible, or some of these things that DOGE is doing, or whatever. And the courts rule it's unconstitutional. And imagine if Trump stands up at some point and says, I'm fed up with the courts trying to tell me what to do. I have a mandate from the American people, and I will not let courts that are motivated by the deep state, evil, whatever ideology, even if they think they're conservatives, it's a bunch of rhinos. They're not real conservatives. They don't have a mandate. Nobody elected them. How dare they? I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to ignore the court. Now, in normal times, if that would happen, and a president just completely ignored the courts, Congress would then impeach the president. That's the escape valve. That's the way we fix things. But is any of you, under the delusion, that Congress would do it? That Congress would actually impeach Trump? Would the House of Representatives impeach him? Would the Senate vote against him? Would any Republican switch? You need 60 votes to get rid of a president. That's what you have to watch for. That's the end of our system of government as we know it. I think Republicans have already ended our system of government in many respects. They should have impeached him after January 6th. Then we wouldn't have this fiasco in our hand right now. Oh, Neil Connor's right. You need 67 votes, not just 60. There's no way you have 67 votes in the Senate. You don't even have a simple majority in the House. Because nobody in the House will vote to impeach. They're so afraid of Trump. I mean, I didn't comment on, because, God, that also happened, about Senator Cassidy's vote for RFK. He's a doctor, for God's sake. He knows exactly the damage that RFK can and likely will do in the health and human services. And he voted for him because he's afraid of Trump. He's afraid of his own voters. He's afraid of MAGA. There is no Republican Party. There's one monolith tribe that does what Trump tells it to do. RFK is a loon, and he's going to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. Because Trump wants that. Many, many senators, I think, have grave misgivings about RFK. Doesn't matter. Trump wants it. Trump will get it. We don't have a Republican Party. We have a Republican monolith. We're a Republican tribe with a clear, unthinking tribe following a moronic leader. All right. Quickly. Trump also signed an executive order creating a sovereign wealth fund. Now, hasn't funded it, and we're far from funding a sovereign wealth fund, but a sovereign wealth fund. A sovereign wealth fund is basically a fund created by a state, a government, that usually is done in countries that have surpluses, have a lot of money flowing in, typically because they have oil or something like oil. A lot of money coming in. They're not spending it on current expenditures. And so the surplus, instead of returning it to taxpayers, they use in order to create this massive wealth fund. Norway has one. Saudi Arabia has one. Qatar and the United Arab Emirates have sovereign wealth funds. Singapore has one. And then they invest that fund, usually diversified globally. In Saudi Arabia, they invest also in projects locally, with the idea that it will make money and it will grow, and that money will then be used in the future, if the oil ever runs out, to supplement government income. These are all countries running huge surpluses. How can you create a sovereign wealth fund when you're running a deficit? Where do you get the money to put in a sovereign wealth fund? If you print that money, it's inflationary. It doesn't stop it being inflationary. That money flows into the market, flows into the economy, and is inflationary. If you borrow in order to fund it, then your deficit goes up dramatically. And I won't even mention if you invested badly, what happens then? Then it's just poof, gone. So there is no basis on which to establish a sovereign wealth fund in the United States. If we go out there and sell land, then it makes sense to use that land, to use the proceeds to pay off our debts. We have $30+ trillion of debts, and that's going to over $100 trillion very quickly here. We should pay off our debts with any excess money we have. We should stop running a deficit. We should do a lot of things, but the idea of, no, we should add, in a sense, to government borrowing, add to the deficit, add to government debt in order to fund a wealth fund, it's just insane. It's within insane. Anyway, it makes no sense. And yet again, this is our president. This is what he wants to do, showing again unbelievable economic ignorance, as if money grows on trees. Maybe it does. It grows at the keyboard of the Federal Reserve. And maybe Trump thinks he can just access it whenever he wants and pour their money into buying TikTok. One of the ideas is the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund will own TikTok. Imagine the free speech implications of the U.S. government owning TikTok. Yeah, you can inflate the debt away, absolutely. But then what? You have inflation. And people don't like inflation. I think very much this election showed that. People don't like inflation. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to watch this and how he thinks it can fund this and whether anybody's going to take this sovereign wealth fund seriously. All right, quickly, a couple of topics. Trump has this idea that he'll kind of deal with Ukraine, where he will supply Ukraine with military aid, and in return, Ukraine will provide the United States with rare earth materials. Ukraine has a lot of rare earth materials, so that actually makes sense. I would support a deal like that. That is a deal that it kind of makes sense. Russia has already said, don't do it. Don't do it. In a sense, saying those rare earth materials are really ours. Don't ship them off to the U.S. But that's going to be an interesting one to watch. It could be a nice way in which the United States gets a return on its investment in Ukraine. Anyway, okay, we talked about USAID. We talked about that. Okay, quickly, this one will just be quick, and then we'll go to your questions. Today's going to be a long show. Bitcoin. Sorry, this one's really funny. So the whole idea of Bitcoin is that it's money. And if it's not money today, it will become money. And, when you tell people, well, but nobody uses Bitcoin as money. No, but they will one day, and it really is money, and and a lot of them at least used to say, well, look, it's legal tender in El Salvador. One of the things Bukele did when he became president was make Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador, and the idea is you could use Bitcoin in the El Salvadoran economy. It turns out it was almost never used. Nobody really wanted to use it. And it turns out, as I've always predicted, that the powers to be in the world don't want Bitcoin, the complexity of Bitcoin, the addition of Bitcoin, the uncontrollability of Bitcoin. They don't want that to be successful. So El Salvador, in spite of the fact that El Salvador, of course, is admired now by the right, they love El Salvador because it's cut its crime rate significantly, unbelievably, really. But El Salvador also has a pretty shitty economy. So El Salvador still needs, in spite of everything Bukele has did there, it still needs help from the IMF. And the IMF has basically said, if you want to help, get rid of Bitcoin as legal tender. And that's exactly what Bukele did yesterday. So the one place in the world where Bitcoin had been legal tender, it is now no longer legal tender. Now, nobody really cares that much in El Salvador because the fact is almost nobody was using it for transactions. But one of the conditions of a proposed $1.4 billion extended fund facility loan from the IMF to El Salvador basically demanded that it stop being a legal tender. It's been legal tender since 2021, and it's now gone. Salvador government has, I think, 6,000 Bitcoins valued at 600 something million dollars. They still need a loan for the IMF. So anyway, it just shows that the authorities, the people, if you will, in charge, they're going to demand that you not use Bitcoin in the end. And most politicians are going to cave. So the ruling party passed this in Congress. It now is no longer legal tender in El Salvador. Now, at 100,000 a Bitcoin, I don't think anybody cares. But there is a question of what underlies Bitcoin. What underlies Bitcoin? The answer to that is basically nothing. The faith, no credit, just the faith of the people who continue to buy Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a purely speculative asset held, whose valuation is determined by speculation, not by any underlying fundamentals. Okay. An hour, 40 minutes later, we covered that. There's a lot more to say. And there's a lot of other stuff that was done this last week. There's the deals that Marco Rubio cut with El Salvador and with Panama and others. We'll try to get back to those later, maybe tomorrow. There's other stuff, and I'm sure there'll be more today and tomorrow. I think there were a couple of executive orders signed today. So, we're gonna have a constant flow of this stuff from the Trump administration going forwards. What underlies gold is gold's non-monetary uses. What underlies gold is that gold has been valued by people since the beginning of time, basically, since the beginning of the discovery of gold. What underlines gold is, again, people want to possess it, want to hold it because it has other uses for a variety of things, particularly as a shiny object. But that's what underlies it. There's nothing that underlies Bitcoin. You can't do anything with Bitcoin. All right. Let's see. Boaz, you're going to be, I'll make another prediction. I've been right so far, pretty on spot on, right, with regard to Bibi and Trump. Trump's proposal is going to die. It's not going anywhere. And Bibi knows it. And Bibi, that is not what convinced Bibi. There's no way. All right, let us make a few things. One is a few things. This is a listener-supported show. It is supported by listeners like you. My time, all the costs involved in producing the show, you fund it. It doesn't come from anywhere else other than our sponsors, which is, again, mostly you. And we don't have that many sponsors. So it's basically you guys. You guys are sponsoring the show. Thank you. And you can do so with the Super Chat sticker right here, right now. If you're on YouTube watching live, if you're not, you can come on over to YouTube and watch live. There's 350 people watching on Twitter. Come over to YouTube and support the show. Or you can go to Patreon, patreon.com, and support the show there on a monthly basis. That is fantastic. You can also do that on PayPal. Patreon, PayPal, same thing. Become a monthly supporter of the Yaron Brook Show. It's how this show survives, continues its path forward. All right. We also have two sponsors. One sponsor is the Ayn Rand Institute. The Ayn Rand Institute is promoting the Ayn Rand Conference in Austin, Texas at the end of this month. The deadline for scholarships is tomorrow. Tomorrow. If you're interested in Ayn Rand's ideas and studying them deeply, and you'd like to go to this conference with Greg Salmieri and Ben Baer and other philosophers, sign up and apply for scholarship. What have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? So go apply on aynrand.org/start here. Alex Epstein. Alex is a sponsor. Alex is, of course, the leading voice in the world today on all things related to energy, fossil fuels, so-called alternative energy, climate change, environmentalism. alexepstein.substack.com, alexepstein.substack.com. And you'll become a lot more knowledgeable and a lot better effective communicator around these issues by engaging with Alex's material. alexepstein.substack.com. All right. Also, if you're not a subscriber to the Yaron Brook Show, there are 200 people on YouTube right now watching. If you're not a subscriber to this show, please subscribe. Just press that button. And if you press the bell, then you get announced every time I go live. And by the way, if you're there pressing buttons, like the show, doesn't cost you anything, helps me. The more interaction there is with the show, the algorithm loves that. So please like the show, subscribe to the show, comment, chat, super chat, stickers, all of that increases the algorithm, improves the positioning of the show in the algorithm. All right, let us do the super chat. Let's jump in. Shahzad, thank you, Shahzad, $100. Please review the song Freebird by Leonard Skinner. All right, I will do that. Copied, pasted. All right. Liam, it seems like young objectivists, or honest people in general, think if you just string together the right combination of words, you can compel understanding in the other person. That when in reality, truth is not a category for so many people. Well, I don't know if that's true of young objectivists. It's true more broadly. People don't understand how to make an argument. Like, your argument needs to be made, conceptually as a logical, rational, abstract argument. But it must be concretized with lots of examples Lots of examples, and this is where people skip. It's the examples where they skip. It's the concrete evidence that they skip. They think the logic of the abstract argument is enough, and it's almost never enough. And it is true that people kind of hold a weird relationship with the truth. There's certain issues in which they unambiguously believe in the truth. Other issues where they don't know what it means. But again, this is where we need to teach people about the truth and start with real simple stuff. I'm holding a bottle of water. That's true. You don't need sophisticated anything to know that. It just is true. There's the bottle. It's plastic. There's water inside. I'm drinking it. Start with the senses. Thank you, Liam. $50. Really appreciate it. Lucinda, $50. Thank you. €50. Better. Although euro's weak, so is the pound. Dollar's getting stronger and stronger as Trump is going. Lucinda says, I haven't kept up with the news. Good for you. Been reading around 1,000 pages a month while also watching and thinking through courses on ARI. I didn't get to till now. Had to switch to digital note-taking because my notebook doesn't have enough pages for all of it. I love Lucinda's kind of unlimited appetite for knowledge and how seriously she takes. How many of you are taking ARI courses or reading and taking constant notes about it? I mean, that's the way you learn. It's the way you study versus just casually listening. Hopper Campbell. Leftist intellectuals I've been engaging with actually think capitalists have created the artificial hierarchy so they can be on top. That's pretty funny. As though Elon Musk isn't motivated by achievement, but by rigging some game so he can have status over others. I think Elon is right now rigging the system to have status over others, so Elon might not be the best case in the world these days. But yeah, I mean, think about where entrepreneurs start. They start over with nothing. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, Rockefeller, Carnegie, they start with nothing. And it's through their production they rise up. So this idea that they create an artificial hierarchy when they rise through that hierarchy. They create it by rising through it. It's not that they're born with money and then they create companies from the top down. They create companies from the bottom up. And so they have no understanding what entrepreneurship is. They have no understanding what businessmen do. They have no understanding how capitalism actually works. They should take upcoming course in ARU that's taught by me and Don Watkins on the nature of capitalism. They should take that course. They need that course. So it's not like in politics where things are done from the top down through brute force, through coercion. People succeed in capitalism. People become billionaires, become capitalists by being successful, by starting companies, by rising and producing value and trading it. Michael, also $50. Thank you, Michael. What gravitates people to Rand is she is the only thinker who explicitly identifies thinking in principle. The idea of connecting things observable in reality. Something the human mind desperately needs, like a baby who is never given its mother's milk. Absolutely. I mean, Ayn Rand is the first philosopher for humans. For real humans, for thinking humans. For humans who want to access their full capabilities as human beings. Ayn Rand is the first philosopher who clearly identifies the mechanism by which we create concepts, the mechanism by which we think, the mechanism by which we use our reason. She's the first philosopher who really understands free will and its nature. And in that sense, again, she's the first philosopher to really explain the human condition, what we are as human beings. And in that, she's as revolutionary as you think she is when you think about capitalism. The real revolution here is in epistemology and ethics. And it's absolutely the thinking and principle, but the idea of free will, the idea of connecting free will to reason, the idea of concept formation, the inductive methods, the essential method by which we discover truth, that is her true contribution. And then, of course, that leads to her solving the is-ought problem in ethics and providing us with a morality of reason, a morality based on human nature and reason. Well, based on human nature means reason, because that is human nature. We are the animal of reason. We are the rational animal. So yes, absolutely, Michael. All right, John. Oh, John has, okay, let me undo that. Let me start with John's $10 questions, because you got, I don't know if it's a 4-part question or 4 different questions, but we'll see. All right, John says, what is the fundamental difference in the eyes of collectivists between an individual and the commercial business that the same individual owns? I mean, the commercial business is always worse, because the commercial business for them is the manifestation of his greed or in the manifestation of his self-interest. Like, they can condemn an individual for being self-interested, but once he forms a business, it is explicit, it is clear what's the purpose of the business: to make money, to produce the products he wants to produce. So it becomes, his self-interest becomes clear and naked, and therefore condemnable by the collectivists. Why does the First Amendment not allow businesses to discriminate and make up their own minds about who is associated with and who not? Probably the same answer as the first. Well, it does. It absolutely allows businessmen to discriminate. So your real question is, why does the court not recognize that fact? But absolutely, the First Amendment does protect all that. The courts reject it. The courts have violated the Constitution by not recognizing that fact. And that is because they resent the existence of a profit-seeking, selfish entity which supposedly has a separate legal status than the individual himself. But it has no legal status independent of the individual. It is an extension of the individuals who own the business. And therefore, to the extent that the individual has free speech, the company has free speech. To the extent that the individual has free association, so does the company. The Supreme Court, unfortunately, has not recognized that. The day it does is a true revolution. John continues, it's crazy to me how public will view having the option to purchase a value as an entitlement as opposed to being gracious to the creators for the opportunity to purchase a good or service. Yes, absolutely. It drives one crazy. It's absolutely the case. People take the values that exist out there as a given, not as having been produced. And if they think about them having been produced, they assume it's the laborer who produced them, not the thinker, not the business owner, not the entrepreneur, not the capitalist, but the laborer. They don't associate the stuff that they need in order to exist with somebody producing that stuff. They just think it's there. And sadly, many intellectuals only support that. John, this is the first definition of discriminate I get from Oxford. Make an unjust or prejudiced distinction in the treatment of different categories of people, especially on the basis of ethnicity, sex, age. Now, that's one usage of the word discriminate. But we discriminate all the time between things we like and things we don't like, between things we love and things we don't like. Discriminate is to differentiate. It's to treat things differently. It could be rational, or it could be irrational. It could be just, or it could be unjust. They're describing unjust as the only way in which to use the word discrimination. But that is wrong. But that is typical of the Oxford Dictionary and just generally, of the way people use words today. Mark says, welcome back. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for the support. Remo, last Sunday I went to a live performance of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. What is your favorite Beethoven symphony if you're only allowed to pick one? Seventh. Seventh is my favorite if I was only allowed to pick one. It's a tough choice between the seventh and the ninth. The ninth, yeah, is grander, but I love the seventh is so dynamic, so powerful, so positive in every aspect. So, but the ninth is a close, very, very close second. Ryan, if markets are efficient and hate uncertainty, then how are markets not responding negatively to the last week? I think there is a feeling that in aggregate, Trump will be good for business thoughts. Well, I mean, I'm dubious about how efficient markets are overall, how knowledgeable markets are about economics and the implications of Trump. I don't think they're a good assessor of that. I mean, look, markets cannot be any more rational, or put it this way, significantly more rational. They can be a little bit more rational than the culture in which they exist. And we don't live in a rational culture. We don't live in a culture that understands the long-term consequences of stuff happening. And therefore, you know, I think markets can be wrong. Now, I'm not going to bet against them because they can be wrong for a very, very long time. But it's also true that they think or feel that in aggregate Trump is going to be better for business. I'm just not sure that they're right about that. It's hard to tell because we don't know what he's going to do. But they don't like uncertainty, and in most cases, uncertainty creates down markets. We don't know when the market's going to be down or exactly how much. But put it this way, if Trump didn't create this chaos and insanity, maybe markets would be up a lot more than they are. I wouldn't be surprised because he has promised a lot of pro-business stuff like deregulation. James, the culture isn't debating how to implement freedom. It's still debating on whether freedom is a good thing. This is a bad position to be in. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the culture is debating freedom. I think the culture is drifting towards unfreedom. I don't think there's a real debate about freedom. Nobody's putting it in terms of freedom. And when you bring up issues of freedom, you're ridiculed by both left and right. Neither side wants to actually think of terms in terms of freedom. And yes, we're in a very bad situation because of that. Michael, is assisted suicide appropriate if you're old and can't work and haven't saved any money? Say in a full capitalist society where there is no social security and you don't want to have to rely on charity in your old age. Yes, I think it is. And you can't start over and you can't become productive again and earn a living. What are you going to do? You rely on charity. You might decide that you'd rather die than live on charity. Completely understand that, and it could be completely appropriate. Michael, people get that building a table or a skyscraper requires certain actions. Why don't they understand that happiness and human flourishing require certain actions? Well, I think to some extent they do. That's why you have so many self-help books out there, right? So people know, and they buy, and they seek it because they buy huge. What they don't want is anything that challenges them too deeply, that challenges other ideas that they have too deeply. And that is, so I'm not just they don't understand it. I think they do. They just don't accept the answers that we give them because they want to hold on to their altruism or they want to hold on to their irrationality. Clark, why did Ayn Rand in the interview just released by ARI say that anyone who wants to proscribe the happiness of another is a monster? What does she mean by that? Well, she means by that if you want to tell somebody else you should be a doctor to be happy, you should marry that woman to be happy. In other words, if somebody else is going to prescribe the values you pursue, then they're a monster. Happiness can only be achieved by you identifying the values for yourself. But, and she wasn't clear here. I mean, she prescribes, to some extent, somebody else's, all of our happiness, by providing us with the basis by which to determine which values. And by a morality that basically orients all values towards life. And that, you evaluate whatever you want based on life. So, at the particular values level, only you can decide what you should pursue. Only you can choose your values. It's only kind of at the universal philosophical level that values can be, in a sense, prescribed. But even there, you have to buy into them. Otherwise, you will not be happy. If you just accept Ayn Rand's, okay, yep, I need to be rational. I need to have integrity, and follow those blindly, you will not be happy. You have to choose them. You have to make them your own. Otherwise, you cannot be happy. So all values, even the universal ones, even the moral values, have to be, in order to achieve happiness, have to be chosen by the individual. And therefore, the individual has to understand. Ali, thanks for the honesty and unbiased take. Thank you. Very few people consider me unbiased, but you're right, I'm not. Elon is a attention seeker, insecure little child, in my opinion. He certainly acts that way when he gets close to politics. Anything political, he gets that way. And he's doing that not just with DOGE, but with his endorsement of AFD and his endorsements in UK politics. He acts like a child. And there is an aspect of attention grabbing that is part of that. Bree says, the 1921 budget law is what makes cutting spending legal. The act allows the president to spend less than what was authorized by Congress, but not more. Coolidge used it to cut the budget and federal debt by 40% in 6 years. Yeah, but there was also a law in 1970-something that reversed that said, no, the president cannot unilaterally cut spending. So again, there is a 1921 law, and then there's a 1970s law, and the courts are going to have to figure that one out. Wyatt, can you confirm ARI didn't take money from USAID? I'm not even going to answer that because it's a stupid question that is irrelevant. Of course, ARI does not get USAID, so I guess I did answer that. But it's just really Wyatt. It's like, you're buying into all the lies you're reading online about who got USAID. It's like the lies about the Biden administration funding condoms in Gaza, right? You repeat them enough times, people stop believing them. Michael, have we been steadily sliding back to the perceptual level since 1960s? I don't know. It seems that way, and not just the 1960s. I think probably even earlier than that. So I'm not sure where peak conceptual level was. Maybe in the early part of the 20th century. Maybe World War II. I don't know. Michael, thoughts on Wall Street Journal's piece on Rand? Well, it wasn't a Wall Street Journal's piece on Rand. It was Zitman's. I've got his books. Rainer Zitterman, this guy, whose books I like. It was his piece on Rand, and it was terrible. It was awful. It showed a real profound misunderstanding of Rand. Really doesn't understand Rand. Very disappointed in him. Very disappointed the Wall Street Journal published it. But on the other hand, Publicity is good publicity. So, you keep Ayn Rand in the headlines, you keep Ayn Rand on the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. That, I think, helps us ultimately, doesn't hurt us. But I was disappointed in him in not understanding, he doesn't understand what emotions. He claimed Ayn Rand was an emotionalist, defended capitalism for emotionally, even though she argued that she was defending it from the perspective of reason, but she really only defended it emotionally. But there's no contradiction between Rand's passion and emotion and her reason. And they shouldn't be in yours. But for him, two different realms that contradict each other. For her, a unity. And it's sad that he doesn't get that. Mark, maybe Israel will have troops there. In the past, UN peacekeepers were used, but that may not be a good alternative. I don't know. I assume there is in Gaza. I mean, Israel's had troops there, and it didn't particularly work well. I mean, there was terrorist attacks constantly. Israel needs to crush Hamas. Crush Hamas. Without doing that, no solution other than kicking the Palestinians out completely, 100%, is going to work. And even if you kick them out, they will just engage in terrorist activities wherever they go, and often against Israel and the United States. Ultimately, they have to be crushed. Not your average algorithm does nothing good come fast. Nothing fast ever lasts. I don't think that's true. Lots of things that come fast last. You can get fat pretty fast and it'll last. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to think of lots of concretes, but it doesn't strike me that any of that is true. Not your average algorithm. Were conservatives right about DEI causing all these ridiculous airplane crashes? No, I don't think DEI caused them. DEI is bad, and it's also a great bogeyman. It's easy to blame everything in DEI, and because DEI is bad, and it's everywhere. So why not blame everything bad on it? But no, it's just a scapegoat. Are we witnessing non-merit hiring policies having a tangible human cost? You experience that every day. Every day, things are less efficient, less productive than they otherwise could be and would be. But to attribute a particular accident, I mean, the female trainee who was piloting the helicopter who probably caused the crash, she scored very, very high on. She was not, by all indications, a DEI appointment. She scored well. She was a merit-based hire. She made a real error, which cost the lives of many, many people. An error that cost her own life, and there was probably some ground control issues. So, we'll see what the investigation shows, but yeah, Ian makes a good point. I wouldn't even bring up merit for an administration that doesn't give a shit about merit, right? What is the new appointee to head our Defense Department? Is that a merit-based appointment? There's no merit. Is RFK a merit-based appointment? He has no merit. Is Tulsi Gabbard really the best person with the highest merit to run all of our intelligence agencies? Of course not. So it's funny coming from this administration, wouldn't know merit if it slapped it in its face. Whatever the hell that means. Thoughts on the government UAP UFO hearings? They claim to have the body of an alien. Well, show it. Show it to somebody. Show it to a scientist. I'd like to see real scientists. I mean, I really think this is, I think it's all BS. I think it's BS on steroids. Let's see it. Put it up on television and let scientists examine it. Kim, but science experts, and we don't believe experts anymore. No experts, no scientists. We don't want knowledge based on science. Kim says, I work at a school, and it's funny to see people cry about Trump getting rid of Department of Education and DEI. Well, he hasn't gotten rid of Department of Education yet. And here's the other thing about Department of Education. This is like USAID. This is the fuzzy part, right? Most of what USAID does and pays will go and be done through the Department of State. So it's not going to go away. And if you look at the plan for dismantling the Department of Education, most of what the Department of Education does today will be done by other departments. It won't just go away. Now, some of it will be allocated to states, but much of it will be done by other departments of government. How about really shutting down the Department of Education and everything that it does? Everything it does. And its entire budget returned to taxpayers, in a sense. Right? It used to pay off the debt. Frank, how can Ukraine join NATO if it has no army? Ukraine has an army. It has a huge army. Right now, one of the largest, if not the largest army in Europe other than Russia. So, of course it has an army. Michael, Trump is being very fascistic, his second term. I wonder who predicted that. Tons of executive orders on abusing hardworking immigrants through aggressive deportation efforts. I'll talk about the aggressive deportation efforts tomorrow. Guantanamo Bay sending illegal immigrants to Guantanamo Bay? Really? What was the other one? Sending American criminals to El Salvador jails? That is a new one. That is quite a twist. So we'll talk about all that tomorrow. Hamad, one Arab businessman was previously asked if he's concerned with Trump threats. He answered no, Trump would say crazy things just to bring you to the negotiating table. Yeah, but again, threats have consequences. Uncertainty being one of them, but lots of consequences. They're not inconsequential. Lucinda says, been watching Rand's Art of Fiction and rereading Atlas slowly, keeping the principles from the course in mind, trying to understand every paragraph. Wow. That's real work. Good for you. Paul, keep up the great work. Thank you, Paul. Frank, is it true that only 800 of 4,000 Gaza greenhouses were destroyed? New York Times article says many were destroyed by Israeli settlers because a road was closed. I don't know, but it doesn't matter, right? Whatever was left, the Palestinians destroyed. And after they destroyed them, there was zero left. So maybe some of them were destroyed before the Israelis left, but whatever was left, and there were significant left, maybe 800, was destroyed by the Palestinians. That's what matters. That's what indicative of their whole mentality, of their attitude. Michael, why was the German public not okay with the Nazi euthanasia program for disabled people, but were fine with liquidation of other groups? Were they not okay with that? Do we know that? Maybe because the disabled people were their relatives, were their neighbors, were people that they were close to, whereas other groups were other groups, didn't belong to their group. Again, tribalism. But I'm not sure they were, that you could say the German public was not okay. I'm not sure that's true. But if it was, it's just more tribalism. Not your average algorithm. Is white trash culture not a thing in rural Europe the same way it is in rural America? I don't know. I mean, there certainly is white trash in rural Europe. You could see that with most of the support for the far right in places like Germany and Netherlands and, bad far right, right? And bad ideas of the far right comes from rural population, which tends to be kind of white trashy, right? So it's there. I think generally they're better educated than the white trash in the U.S., but they're still as emotionalist, nationalist, collectivist as American white trash, if you will. Michael, I've seen Rand's name pop up a lot more recently, from Richard Hanania to Brett Cooper, now Wall Street Journal. These are good signs. Yeah, they're good signs. It's periodic. Every few years, there's a big rise in Ayn Rand's name visibility in the culture. and then it declines and then rises again. Maybe it'll rise and stay high this time. We will see. But it's basically good. I'm not sure about Brett Cooper being good. I mean, she's not good in her ideas. She's very bad. Her using and associating herself with Ayn Rand is probably not a good idea. Not good for the movement, not good for us. Michael says, you say you're more optimistic about Asia because they have never had Christian altruism. But a lot of these South Korean shows, like Squid Games, are filled with the altruism as ideal hero. Yes, I mean, they haven't escaped completely from altruism, and altruism, to some extent, exists in Asian cultures, to some extent. South Korea has gone through a conversion to Christianity, which only emphasizes altruism even more in a place like South Korea. But South Korea also has shows like Mr. Sunshine. It also has shows like Itaewon Class that are very non-Christian and very non-altruistic. So I think South Korean culture is mixed. It's got the Christian attitudes, but it's also got much healthier streams of thought, of ideas within the culture. So it's not monotone. I don't think Squid Games is representative of North Korean culture, happily, because all these other shows are a million times better in terms of sense of life, in terms of values than Squid Games. Squid Games is an awful, awful, awful anti-capitalist, anti-values show. It is, I can't imagine a worse show than Squid Games. Not your average algorithm. Elon Musk seems very impressed by Blake Scholes and Boom Airlines. He said he might invest. Good. I mean, that'll be great if he does. I don't think he was an early investor in them. I know several early investors in them. I don't think he was one of them. Not your average algorithm. Did the 1920s Germany have a lot of Tucker Carlsons and RFK types in positions of power and influence? Conspiracy theorist gibberish was just the norm. It was in the 30s with the Nazis rising. A lot of Nazis were real weird mystics, conspiracy theorists. There was a lot of that in Germany in the 20s and 30s. A lot of that. There were a lot of these types in Germany, absolutely. Henry Allen, if you were in Elon's position and you could choose either one, run DOGE, B, put pressure on Trump to drop tariffs, which would you choose? Why? Well, I don't know why you would have to choose. I mean, why you would only have to do one, but I would put pressure on Trump to drop tariffs so that you can focus, so he could, and you could focus on everything else that needed to be done. And, why would you assume that Elon is the only guy who's got decent ideas about cutting government spending? There are lots of people who have good ideas about cutting spending, better than Musk. So drop tariffs and focus on getting people who actually know something about cutting spending. There are plenty of them at Cato, at the American Institute for Economic Affairs. They're people who've spent their lives analyzing government budgets and knowing where you should cut first. There are also people who've written extensively on how to reform Social Security and Medicare. So you could cut $2 trillion off the budget. You could do it, but not through DOGE. DOGE is useless. They're going to do a lot of noise, a lot of breaking glass, and very little actual achievements in terms of cutting government spending, shrinking government over the long run. James Taylor, you notice Trump's press secretary wears a giant cross for every press conference. Very ominous. Yeah, I mean, it's like the big cross tattoo that his Secretary of Defense has on his chest. You know, the cross of the Crusaders. Not a good sign. Very ominous. Supkaski, how would you rank President Musk so far? Oh, D-. Ryan, DOGE should just work in Medicare, Medicaid. Yeah, I mean, they could do a lot of good in Medicare, Medicaid. There's a lot of fraud, a lot of waste. But ultimately, what you need in Medicare, Medicaid is total reform, which you need to do through the legislature. Total reform. You need to completely rethink the entities. Frank says, dumb AOC refers to Musk as unintelligent billionaire. She also focuses on word billionaire. His dollars, but not Tesla, PayPal, SpaceX, Starlink, insane. Yeah, but I don't think AOC is dumb. I think she knows what she's doing. She's appealing to a particular constituency, and she knows how to play that constituency really, really well. I've talked about the fact that I don't think AOC is dumb in past shows. Anyway, could you clarify what the difference is in specifying qua itself means what? Could you clarify what the difference is in specifying qua itself means rather than just using itself? I think it's just emphasis. As itself, as what its nature requires. Man qua man. So as man. As such. Which I don't think you get from just saying man is man. Or just as man as man versus man as animal. Or man as the things people think of as man, but not really man. So I think it just there's an emphasis on what you want to focus on, where you want it focused. The essence. You want it an essence of man. Esoteric dichotomy, do you have a favorite animal? Thoughts on zoos? My favorite animal are the big cats, lions and tigers, I'd say. I love lions, but I have to say, from the perspective of a zoo, the most impressive animal I've ever seen are the tigers. In a zoo, you can get up real close to them. They're massive animals, and they have this just the power that they have, speed and power that you can see through the muscles. Unbelievable. So I'd say the big cats. I'm all in favor of zoos, even though, you want the animals treated well. You don't want them to be abused, but I'm a fan of zoos. Zoos allow human beings to see animals, big animals, dangerous animals from a safe distance. So I'm a big fan of them. I understand people who don't like them because of the animals are not in their natural setting, but there's no way for me to ever see a tiger in an animal setting, and I got a lot of value from seeing a tiger real up close at the San Francisco Zoo. They're beautiful tigers. So I'm fine with zoos. I have no problems. Animals don't have rights. They're there for us, and I do think that in this case, we can get value from seeing them like that. A safari, you can go on a safari and never see a lion. And this is a great, concentrated, easy, and safe way to see animals and see, what they are. I've been a safari. They were a lot of fun. You see animals in quantity. You see them in their natural setting. But you're not going to see a lot of animals. It takes real effort to see a lion in a safari. Usually very expensive. All right, everybody. First of all, thank you. We made our 3-hour goal, so really, really appreciate all of you guys. And I know I missed a bunch of stickers, so I apologize for not recognizing everybody who did a sticker, but let me try. Silvanos, thank you. Alan, thank you. Stephen, thank you. Vadim, thank you. I probably missed some of you. I know Jonathan was there. So Jonathan, there's Jonathan. Anyway, thank you to all the stickers, all the super chatters. To be repeated tomorrow. There's still tons to talk about just on what the news that happened while I was gone. And there'll, of course, be news from today and tomorrow. We'll pick up where we left up tomorrow, 2 p.m. East Coast time. See you all there and have a great rest of your week. Yep. Rest of today and tomorrow. Bye, everybody.